Welcome to the Writer Reads Mack and Me, an Odyssey. Book 2, Mack and Me, Blaedergil's Host. Chapter 11, Round 2, Briefing. The meeting before the briefing was short and not so sweet. The rest of the crew cleared out and we discussed the situation on Kostrel while we ate. Delight had been doing some studying, while Mack and I had been guests of the Coravan clan. She confirmed there were indeed 18 clans on Kostrel, and the Coravans were the 14th. Clan Hazurna was 7th. For the Coravans to have lost the chance to marry that far up the food chain was a big blow to them, and explained a lot about why they wanted their kidnapped bride back. "So it's a political marriage?" I asked, and Delight nodded. "As far as we can tell, the first time the bride and groom met was 6 days before the wedding. Blaedergil kidnapped her the morning after that first meet-up." "You are shitting me. Why?" "The Hazurnas are 7th in the pecking order. It's far enough up the food chain for them to have significant power, and just low enough that they avoid a lot of the more noticeable side effects of that much power. Blaedergil was setting himself up to have a deciding interest in the trade treaties Kostrel controls." "Blaedergil's dead." "Yeah, but Skymander isn't," Mack interjected. And I remembered something Blaedergil said. "The guy Blaedergil was going to send his bride to after the birth?" "Yep." He didn't look happy, and it took me a minute to catch on. "Skymander's the one doing the wheeling and dealing?" "Yep. And why did he let Blaedergil—" I swallowed hard. Mac worked out what I was trying to say anyway. "Skymander's world is an unfriendly one. By having Blaedergil source his brides, he could be sure of 2 things: that they were fertile, and that they were strong in both mind and body." "That's sick." "Yep." "But I thought Skymander lived on Magnus 19. He doesn't." Mac shook his head. "Nope, he doesn't. We're still trying to work out exactly where he's based. All we have so far is from Blaedergil's records. Skymander's world is hard, and those visiting it tend to get sick." "Those girls upstairs?" "Yes. None could build the immunities they needed for the diseases they'd encounter on Skymander's home planet." "We should burn that place to the ground." Mac exchanged a look with Delight, and I couldn't fathom what passed between them. It didn't matter. "It has to go, Mac," I insisted, and Delight gave a snort of laughter. "Who made you judge, jury, and executioner?" she sneered. I glared at her, wanting to ask who had made her one. I answered the question instead. "You did, when you had Mac kill me so you could get my ass on world so I could do your dirty work." I put one hand on my hip and cocked my head. "What's the matter? Didn't have the intestines to do it yourself?" I paused, saw Mac's mouth open and forged ahead before he could stop me. "Oh, wait! Maybe you weren't Blaedergil's type. Shame that, because he really isn't picky." Tens came through the door as I said it, and he stopped dead in his tracks, staring at me and Delight, his mouth dropping open in shock. Up until that point, Delight had been looking mildly annoyed, but now she grinned. And it wasn't a friendly grin. It was more the kind of tooth-baring grin you give when you're about to smack the crap out of somebody. When she replied, her tone was sugar-sweet. "Oh, sweetie, we both know I wasn't the best person for the job. Like you said, Blaedergil isn't picky, and it's you who needs the money." It was the best comeback she could have made, and I was momentarily stunned to silence. I heard Ten suck air past his teeth. "Ouch," he said, and turned to me. "I'd quit while I was a head cutter. We haven't got time for a cat fight." Before I could reply, he'd grabbed a hot cup of caf and headed back out the door. "I've set us up in 9, he told Mac. "You coming, boss?" I saw Mac raise an eyebrow at him, and then the captain reached over and slipped his arm through mine. "I think I'd better bring Cutter," he said. "There's no telling what might happen to her if I leave her on her own." Delight gave a soft rumph and got up to sashay after Tens. "Come on," Mac said, and we followed after them. I went with him, mostly because I was curious as to what exactly we were going to do next, and partly because I couldn't think of an alternative. What I wanted to do, now that I thought about it, was check my credit balance and see just how much more I'd need in order to be able to get out from under Odyssey's great big thumb. I followed Mac into the briefing room and took a seat one down from him, near the head of the table. That earned me a speculative look from all three of them. Understandable, given I was known for sitting as far from any of them as I could possibly manage, and Mac in particular. I ignored them. Mac must have realised I wasn't going to say anything and started the briefing. This is Lord Andreas Corovan, he said, putting a picture of the young stabby lordling on the screen at the end of the room. He intercepted our delivery of Malari Hazurna to her mother, Tristal Hazurna. He is currently holding the Lady Malari hostage so that we do as he asks. He wants us to retrieve Malari's older sister, the Lady Trevani, from her current whereabouts. When we return with her, he claims he'll give us the Lady Malari and the cure for the disease she is carrying. I do not believe he will hold up his end of the bargain. There is something about him that is not quite stable. He paused, looking at us. When none of us asked any questions, he went on. At first glance, it appears he's only in love with the older sister, but once he gets to talking, it's easy to see that he does not view her as a lover, but as a possession. This man is angry because someone has stolen one of his possessions away. There was a snarl of revulsion in Mac's voice as he continued. He has malaria in stasis and is replicating the cure to make sure there's enough for distribution, but I believe that is more for his own people than for anyone else. Initial impressions indicate he may attempt to follow in Blaedergil's footsteps and hold the planet to ransom with the virus in Malari's system, even if we return Trevani to him. Mac turned to Delight. Odyssey needs to be prepared. She nodded. Done. I watched as Mac's gaze flicked over us, and then he pulled up a visual of Blaedergil's complex on Magnus 19. Tens, he invited, and Tens rose from his seat and moved to the top of the table. I watched him as he passed, saw his gaze flicker over us as he began to speak. We believe the authorities are yet to discover that Blaedergil is dead and gone. There's been no traffic into or out of his facility since our last visit. Unfortunately, we can't be sure, as we are still working on hacking his communications system. I saw his face flush as he said it, and knew he was more than embarrassed at having to admit there was a system he had yet to crack. It also made me feel better about the fact that Blaedergil had hacked my implant, because if his people were good enough to defeat Tens, then they were very good indeed. That was poor comfort, though. We needed to know of any potential compromises to the operations. Not knowing who might or might not have been trying to contact Blaedergil since our extraction of Malari was a serious flaw. I slid a glance at Delight and saw she was none too pleased. Tens caught her look and passed the unspoken question to Mac. Mac sighed. We have no choice. Lord Corovan will not allow for delays, and his people do not have Tens's skills. It's a risk we'll have to take. He passed control back to Tens with a look. So, we do not know if there's been anything in the comms that would have made anyone suspicious enough to come looking. We have to assume there has been, but that the interested parties haven't arrived yet. We're still trying to pull data from Skymander's world, but that's closed up tight. It's not as tight as Depredates, but it's pretty darn close. He glanced at me as he spoke, and I felt the warmth flow up my cheeks as my face coloured in embarrassment. I remembered Depredates. I'd been fortunate that the communications security company had decided to contact Abby and let her know their plans to gatecrash her auction. If they hadn't, Mac and his team might not have been able to pull me out in time. Yeah, that was another time one of my bids for freedom had been cut unexpectedly short. Tens didn't pause long enough to rub it in, though. He kept right on with the briefing. We've gotten into the admin system for Magnus 19. That should give us warning of any interesting flights coming in, or if they choose to dispatch anyone to see why the Blaedergil complex has gone dark. In the meantime, we have the full blueprints for the facilities. Let's just say that some of Blaedergil's contractors do not have his level of communications security. He went on to describe the layout and then walk us through the areas that would be of more interest to us. We don't believe Trevani is being held on the upper floors where the infected women and Malari were located, but we can't rule it out. We also can't be sure the house guard are unaware of the real nature of Blaedergil's absence. They don't usually come into those parts of the complex. Whether or not they've started looking for him is currently anyone's guess, and you will be going in before we have time to make it anything less. Tens highlighted the birthing suites, and I realized that Blaedergil hadn't been lying about the woman giving birth. Her cries had come from the right floor, and the right direction on that floor. I hadn't stayed long enough to confirm it, but had hurried straight up to where we had been told Malari was being held, which begged the question, who gave us the intel on where to find Malari? I interrupted as Tens drew breath to continue the briefing. I watched as Tens closed his mouth again and turned his full attention to me. For a moment I thought I'd asked something inappropriate, but I watched as Tens went still. His face grew blank as he focused on the question, and I figured he was replaying the events leading up to our incursion. I thought we got that from Lady Hazurna, Delight broke in. But when I turned to look at her, her face too had the withdrawn look of someone checking their memories. Mack and I waited while they got on with it. After a minute of studying them, Mack spoke. It wasn't direct, was it? He asked, and both of them coloured in response. Mack closed his eyes and leant his head back against the wall he was standing against. Is there anything else you can add to your brief? He asked, and Tens was momentarily silent. When he replied, there was no doubt in his response. I'll run you through the entry sequence and then the route to where I think you need to go. After that, I've marked a couple of potential exit routes, but you'll have to discuss them. The team will be on overwatch as usual, so porting you in and out is now an option, as long as you reach the upper floors or the roof. We still haven't dealt with the shielding on the lower levels. Don't get caught down there. Can you pick us up if we got outside the building? I asked. I remembered seeing windows and ledges and balconies. Tens thought about it and nodded. We'll keep those in mind for an emergency, I told him. Is there anything else? Mac wanted to know, his gaze shifting between Tens and Delight and only briefly resting on me. I gathered he was asking if there was any more to the briefing, not if I had any more questions. When we were all silent, he pushed off the wall and headed for the door. You and Delight have homework, he told Tens. Find me the informant and means of contact, and get me Skymander's whereabouts. I was on my feet and following him before he remembered I was there. Cutter, you're with me. Like I couldn't tell that, I sniped, but he didn't stop. In fact, he showed no sign of having heard me at all.